A well-dressed man walked into the local bank one chilly morning. His crisp suit stood out against the backdrop of the bustling city streets. He had a calm, professional air about him, yet there was a subtle sense of frustration in his eyes as he stepped into the branch. His business had to be taken care of today, and he was hopeful that the bank could help him with it. The receptionist, a woman named Amanda, greeted him with a polite smile. But before he could even say much, she held up a hand. "Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly," she said. He nodded and took a seat in the waiting area. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 9:30 a.m. He had arrived early, thinking that it might help him get things done faster. Little did he know, he would end up waiting for far longer than expected. As the minutes ticked by, he became more aware of how empty the bank felt. There were a few staff members behind the counters, busy with their own tasks, but no one seemed to notice him sitting there. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, checking his watch every few minutes. Around him, the quiet was almost deafening. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only noise that broke the silence. He could see a couple of customers being helped quickly, but none of them looked like him. The room felt cold, even though the heat was on. By now, it had been almost an hour. The man started to feel uneasy. Why was he being ignored? Was there something wrong with his request? He didn't think so, but the longer he waited, the more his patience started to wear thin. His eyes wandered around the room, taking in the various posters and pamphlets hanging on the walls. He stood up and approached the receptionist again, trying his best to keep his cool. "Excuse me, I've been waiting for quite a while. Could someone help me?" he asked politely. The receptionist looked at him with a slight frown, her smile fading just a bit. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Someone will be with you soon," she said, almost dismissively. With that, she turned back to the phone call she was engaged in. After another 30 minutes, it was now 11 a.m., and the man was beginning to lose hope. He had other important tasks to attend to, and he couldn't afford to waste much more time. His patience was almost gone, and he was starting to feel like he was being treated differently. But he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Just as he was about to leave, the sound of the bank's door opening caught his attention. 3 people walked in, all wearing expensive suits. They were the board members of the bank, the big shots. They were tall, confident, and carried an air of authority. The man's heart sank a little as he realized they were heading straight for the reception area. The receptionist, Amanda, suddenly sprang into action. She stood up quickly and greeted them with a wide, enthusiastic smile. "Good morning, Mr. Roberts, Mrs. Davis, and Mr. Thompson. Welcome! It's so great to see you all." The man in the waiting area watched in surprise as Amanda greeted them with a level of warmth and respect that she hadn't shown him at all. She even offered them coffee and pointed them toward the private office in the back. The stark contrast between how they were treated and how he had been treated made him feel uncomfortable. He felt invisible, like he didn't matter. It wasn't just about the wait anymore. It was about the way he was being made to feel. His thoughts raced. Was it because of his appearance? Was he being judged based on something that had nothing to do with his character or his business? As the board members settled into the private office, Amanda turned to the man in the waiting area. "Oh, I'm so sorry for the wait," she said, her tone suddenly much softer. "Please, come right this way." He stood up, his mind swirling with questions. Was it the appearance of the board members that changed everything? Or had something about his presence been overlooked until now? He walked toward her, trying to mask the confusion in his expression. The anger he felt was hard to ignore, but he didn't want to make a scene. Amanda led him to a desk in the back office, where another banker was ready to assist him. The process moved quickly now that he had the full attention of the staff, but his mind was still stuck on what had just happened. Why had he been made to wait so long? Was it a coincidence that the moment the board members arrived, everything changed? He tried to focus on the business at hand, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the way the situation had unfolded. It was as if he hadn't existed until those important people walked in. As the banker processed his request, the man couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if he had looked like those board members. The man did his best to stay calm, focusing on the task in front of him. But inside, his mind was racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He was being treated differently, and it stung. The idea that his presence hadn't mattered until the board members came in was hard to ignore. As the banker finished processing his request, the man signed the necessary paperwork, still grappling with his emotions. He didn't want to cause a scene or make a fuss, but the frustration was building. Why had he been forced to wait for 2 hours, while others seemed to get quicker, better service? When he stood up to leave, Amanda was standing by the door, looking at him with a friendly smile. But something in her demeanor had shifted. It wasn't just professional anymore. It almost felt like sympathy, like she knew she had done something wrong. "I hope you're satisfied with everything now," she said, trying to sound warm, but it didn't reach her eyes. The man forced a smile, nodding politely, though he could hardly mask the bitterness he was feeling. "Yes, thank you for your help," he said, though his words felt empty. He didn't want to engage any longer than necessary. He just wanted to leave. As he walked out the door, he could hear the board members laughing and chatting in the back office. The difference in how they were treated compared to him was glaring. He couldn't understand how something as simple as a bank visit could reveal so much about how people were treated differently based on how they looked. Stepping out into the cool air, he took a deep breath, trying to shake off the negative emotions. But it was hard. The experience had left him feeling small, invisible, as though his worth was determined by factors outside of his control. He thought about all the other people who might walk into that bank and face the same treatment, the ones who didn't fit the mold of what was considered important. How many times had this happened to others? How many times had someone been made to feel lesser than they really were, simply because they didn't have the right look or the right status? The man couldn't let it go. He wasn't one to stay silent when something wasn't right. This was bigger than just his experience. It was about fairness and respect for everyone. The thought of the bank's treatment of him was still heavy on his heart as he made his way down the street. At that moment, he decided he wasn't going to keep quiet. He would find a way to make sure his voice was heard. Whether through a letter or a conversation with the right people, he would not let this go unnoticed. He had every right to be treated with dignity, just like anyone else, regardless of his appearance. The day was far from over, and the frustration he felt wasn't going to disappear that easily. But the man was determined to not let that experience define him. It would fuel him to demand better treatment, not just for himself, but for others who may have experienced the same thing. The treatment he received at the bank wasn't just about poor customer service. It was about respect, or the lack of it. He took a moment to reflect, feeling the weight of the situation. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about holding people accountable, holding institutions accountable. Because everyone deserved the same level of respect, no matter their background, appearance, or status. If you like this video, then subscribe this channel.